All right, we are here at beautiful McClure's Beach in Point Reyes Seashore here in Northern California, Marin County, and going to do a coastal scene here. And some considerations compared to other scenarios is the main thing would be the amount of atmosphere in the air. And that's something for me that always has attracted me to coastal paintings. Some of my favorite subjects are beaches, shorelines, and all that. And one of the main reasons for that is the amount of atmospheric depth that you could find in a scene like that. So I want to show you how you can quickly and effectively set that up when you think about a scene like this. So let's go ahead and determine where our horizon line will be at first. And I think I'm going to put it like the lower third of the painting. And this is my mixture of manganese blue and burnt sienna. It's kind of a nice little neutral gray color for me. A little bit of white just so that's not so dark. And I'm going to draw the shape of this rock in the background. Or, not background, it's going to be our main shape in here. So, kind of just drawing it with my brush here. And when I'm plotting out this drawing, I'm just putting on my canvas where I want the shapes to sit within the scene, and then just kind of trying to draw the shape around it. There's like a beach next to the rock here, just coming up. And this rock kind of pops out, comes down. Drawing the big main shapes, but it's such a unique big shape to this rock that we'll carve into it later. We could set it up pretty quickly with paint. The next part will be to draw the shore, make the surf kind of do this, measure it out. The main subject will be this rock, so we'll get into how to paint the waves and all that later, but really doesn't take much time to set up a scene like this because you have a big main shape there, and that's what we're going to be really after here. First thing we're gonna do is start with the sky. So I'm gonna mix up some medium here. This is Rublev Pale Drying Oil. I think what I will do is mix up a little batch of sky color with what I got here. So take my white, mix a little manganese blue into it. Bit of ultramarine blue to get the depth of the blue color in the sky. And I always like to get a little bit of alizarin crimson in there. There's always a little bit of pinkish color in the sky I've observed. So this will be our base color for the sky, and we'll see how much of it we'll need for now. So as always, just put down that mixture. Keep it kind of thin for now. Don't worry about the variations yet. We're just establishing the big color shapes here. So I just like to put these down as one tone. And next we'll move to where the water meets the horizon. That, from what I've observed, is the darkest part of the water. So I'll paint it that way. Now I'm kind of squinting and observing the color of the water. And even though there's so many different waves, when you squint down far enough, it can kind of become a overall color tone and shape. So what I'm seeing is it's similar to the color of the sky, but a little lighter and a little greener. So I'm gonna just paint it that way. Just use the whole, or use this color to represent the entire color of the water where the waves are happening, where they're crashing onto the beach. So okay, it's actually a little darker than I have. So take some Viridian and mix that back in. If I go too light with the color of the water, then the color of the waves is going to be it's not going to read as light enough to stand out. So next we'll do the color of the sand. Basically took that same color, added yellow ochre to it. That's actually kind of close to what I got. Maybe add a little bit of purple. Okay, color of the rock. It's somewhere in between the color of the sky and a darker version of the color of the sand. So what I'll have to do is mix a big pile. I'm gonna start with white, add a little burnt sienna to it. Judging that's too reddish and pinkish, so add a little bit of Viridian to gray it down. Comparing the color of that's on my knife to what's up there, and that's actually kind of close. So let's see what we get when we mix this down. Is that too light? I think it is. It's not showing up as dark enough against the sky to really stand apart from it. So let's add some ultramarine blue to make it a gray. Still not dark enough, but we'll fix that very soon. That distant beach is going to be represented by this little sliver. Okay. The main shadows I see are within that rock. So what I gotta do is mix up a color of shadow for those rocks. So I'm gonna take what I just mixed here and create a darker complementary color to counter against that. So since I had a green and red mixture here, it's gonna have to go greener and a darker red to get to a shadow color. So let's see, is that dark enough? No, not even close. Maybe I'll add a neutral color to knock it down. So adding burnt umber to our mixture and ultramarine blue to turn that into a dark gray. That's better. It's a little on the warm side, but we'll fix that. Putting in that shadow color. It's really more of a tone than actual color, I would say. Just creating the shadow shapes with my brush, making a very generalized version of all the different crevices and cliffs I see. too blue. Okay. It's going to be a little trickier to get the color of the shadows within the water because they move so much. So we're just going to have to kind of squint at them and approximate some sort of shape. And it's going to be ever changing, so we're just going to have to like create a shape and go with it. Just taking some darker aqua green and what I'm doing with this is kind of trying to draw the shape of the cast shadow of the wave that I see. Kind of doing some little similar shape to this. Put a few more here and there. So you get closer to me, I notice they get bluer, so do that. Squinting at them, determining what small shapes I see. And it's something like that. I don't know. They're so ever changing that it's hard to even like determine that your shapes are accurate or not. So we'll just have to get the impression of them. The color of the water retreating from the shore. Okay, those are the darks in our scene. Let's block in the light sides now. As the sky meets the horizon, gets a little lighter, a little more yellow. So took my sky color and added some yellow, ochre, and white to it. So that's what we're doing here. Okay. Try and create a color of the light hitting the waves. Start with white, add a little bit of permanent green to it, and slight bit of cadmium yellow. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. As long as it's standing out as lighter than what I had before, that'll be okay for now. Treating the tops of the waves like a plane. Just putting it in where I observe it. Now, let's do the lighter parts. Okay, let's do the lighter parts of the rock here. Start with, actually, let's start with the base of yellow ochre. Mix that into what I had before. See if I can lighten that a bit. Just going in with the generalized light shape and kind of tracing around and making that shape into what I'm observing here. Looks like it goes a little darker over here. So I'll just take another color that's darker than my yellow ochre and use that. Okay, our canvas is covered and have everything established, so let's get in here and start to compare. Okay, let's start to compare all these shapes that I have going on here. First thing I like to do is decide, okay, is my sky light enough or dark enough against the shapes that are connecting to it. And I think for the most part, I'm doing pretty well. It does seem to get a little darker up toward the zenith, so that's a manganese blue up here. Just mixing it kind of directly into the color of the sky that I already have. The very top gets a little more dark and bluish, or cool, I should say. So add a little bit of ultramarine blue up there. Just want to make that little gradient happen there. Okay. Next, let's take this area here and figure that out. I think it's a good value. The color is just a little bit off, so you take a little bit of a cool blue and try and match the value. That's pretty good. I'm not quite yet putting in reflected light. I'm really just changing the color of this shadow shape to more closely resemble what I'm actually seeing in front of me. Because if you remember from the establishment stage, we were just creating an approximate like average tone to everything. So now we're getting in here and actually like figuring out, okay, how does what we actually observe differ from this average that I created? And the way you determine that is you just look at each shape in relation to what's next to it, and you go, okay, what do I need to change and how to make it closer to what I'm observing? So there's a little bit of a orangey color I'm going to put in there. There's a light shape I missed up here that's very grayish green, so I'm going to put that in there. Observing all the darks. On a sunny day like this, you can a lot of times observe a purple kind of color in the shadows. So I use alizarin crimson to represent that. I just mix a little bit of alizarin crimson into my grayish blue shadows, and that tends to get fairly close to what I'm after. And so I'm using this color to draw in a more accurate version of the shapes I already have down. It feels like the closer I get to the sky up here, the darker it goes. So that's something you gotta observe and record in your painting. So I'm noticing some major differences in the shape and color of the light side, but I'm just focusing on the darks for now. To keep things simple, I like to just observe one side of the light and dark spectrum at a time. I mix the shadow color a little darker than I want because I'm putting it over something lighter, and it's just going to mix in with what's underneath and tone it down, or lighten it up, I should say. I won't mess with the waves too much until we get to the refinement stage, because there's only so much comparing you can do until you get to the very end and decide where you're going to go with it. So let's stick with the light of the rock and maybe clear a little mixing area for me on my palette. Squint at what I got and decide what I need here. So there are a lot of variations within the light side, and what I'm gonna do is kind of treat the lighter parts of the cliff that I'm seeing like highlights. So what that means is I will have to kind of reobserve the larger shapes that create the light side of the rock. So go ahead and mix something out of that. Start with white and maybe burnt umber this time. Make like a colder warm as a base. Start with, I don't know, a little manganese blue to it. Let's see how this works. If I need to warm it up, I'll use yellow ochre. So let's start with that. It's pretty close to what I'm seeing. As it goes down here, it gets cooler. So I'll add some violet and viridian. These rocks themselves are pretty gray. Other than like the areas where the light's really catching on it. So painting it that way. Finding slight variations in the rock as I refine the light shape. Now it looks like it's a completely different color of the rock, like the actual local color variation of the rock. It's showing up in certain areas here too. So creating a different color to vary that. Okay, well, now that the lights are actually better compared, I want to come back in and reestablish some of these darks that I don't feel are accurate as much anymore now that we've changed the color of the light so much. So let's create some mixing area for our lights. And what I'm seeing in the darks is actually pretty dark blue to start with here. mix in a little bit of that color. Neutralize that with some burnt sienna. And let's go from there. Actually, add a little alizarin crimson. Okay. Alright, I think those colors are much better observed now. Go ahead and do a bit of fixing there. Okay, well, I think this will do it for the comparison stage. Just want to kind of compare all these shapes together and make them a little bit more accurate to what I was seeing before. Maybe here and there. There might be a couple little parts here and there quite hit. But yeah, so next will just be the refinement stage, adding all the extra details and coming in and really deciding what the shape of all the waves and stuff will be. Okay, all right, so refinement stage. First thing I'm gonna do is try and figure out the reflected light in here, and what I mean by that is really just like the extra color in the shadows that I haven't yet observed in a really meaningful way. And what I love about beach scenes, or coastal scenes in general, is all the mist in the air, how it contributes to observing different colors in the shadows. And I feel like that's kind of the key to getting a sense of that mist and atmosphere in the air. So taking some bluish color in the palette and adding some actually cadmium orange, using that to lighten up. So these colors, I believe, are just the reflections of these cliffs that are nearby into the backside of these rocks here. So the smaller the shape of the shadow, the less you'll see it. Adding those sort of cooler blues, or not even cooler, they're actually maybe a little warmer than what I had. So these warmer, lighter blues into the shadows make a more misty feeling into the atmosphere of your painting. And alright, next I will move into painting some of these highlights, and I feel like the highlights are really what's gonna make these rocks feel wet and sunlit. So let's make some room on our palette for that. Get some of my medium. I think what I'll actually do is use my palette knife to create a base color for my highlights. So white and yellow ochre. And then just modify this as I go. It's probably gonna be pretty close to this. Just gotta make sure that's really standing out as a highlight. I'll lay these strokes down in one shot, if possible. Even though they're highlights, they might end up reading as too bright. So feel free to tone them down a little bit. I'm actually adding a little bit of cobalt violet hue to this to make it less of a strong highlight. Wind's starting to pick up, so let's make it a little bit more difficult to be accurate with these little brush strokes, but use your pinky to steady your hand. I never got in the habit of using a maul stick, but that's also something you can try. Even though I'm treating these like highlights, these are still rocks we're painting, so they're not going to be super reflective of the sun, so don't make them too bright. This mixture of yellow, ochre, and white that I have going on here is plenty bright enough. Dealing with late afternoon light here, so it's actually a little more golden of a light than I had observed when we started here, so it's not really going to affect the rest of the painting too much, but it is going to make it a little more warm of a painting overall, which is not bad. It's less misty in the air, I feel like, as well. So things are reading a little sharper than they were before. That's fine. highlight on there. Shadow back in down here. Okay, well, I think that's all I want to do with the rock. So let's get into figure out what to do with the waves. Still want to observe them just like everything else. Continue to compare and refine them. But let's start. It's going to be a bit more general than trying to really closely observe. I wonder if that showed up in the in the video. But I just want to do it in a more general way. So, taking this observation of the color, taking white, permanent green, bit of yellow ochre. If I need to put blue back in, I'll do that. But using a bigger brush and brushing down in a way that kind of implies the movement of the waves in the surf crashing. Got some cool waves crashing up here. Observing this plane. A lot of horizontals in the waves as they break and churn. Painting it very carefully, but trying to observe that as best as I can. The color of these waves are not as green as I had them. The shadows, I mean. A lot more like ultramarine blue, so paint that in that way. Really just trying to make an approximation for what I'm seeing here. Just adding a little bit more color in there, just making changes to what I already had before, doing it in a way that's careful and truthful. Edges back here are pretty soft, where this part of the water meets the beach. Just brushing that in very lightly. I'm going to try and go for a few more highlights on these waves. Last but not least, let's get the beach here. Let's see, that was mostly yellow ochre and cobalt violet hue, if I remember right. It's a little more greenish than I have down, so that's permanent green to that. That's in a little bit of the shadows to hint at these footprints. Serving a pretty decent amount of violet in the shadows on the sand here. I mean, it's probably in reality a little more neutral than that, but I think the violet just gives it an extra bit of color into this area of the painting that might normally just be a little uninteresting. Gotta go too overboard on that, just enough to observe that. Maybe come in and add some highlight. Don't make the highlight too much brighter than what's underneath. If it ends up too busy, just kind of soften it with your brush. Try it again. Okay, well, it's there. Little parts that I got lost as far as contrast goes. All right. Okay, well, I think that will do it for this study here. This is how I observe a beach rock and paint it to completion. All right.